Hello and welcome to another episode of Awaken, Heal and Transform with your host, me, Francesca Raffa. It has been forever since I have recorded a podcast for you all, but I am back. She is back. And I am so excited to bring to this space some brand new, amazing guests through other encounters that I have made through my life so far. And I feel like lots has changed. There has been so much transformation personally. And of course, that is then reflected on my outer world. So today I'm going to be welcoming a very special guest, and I'm really excited to get into this one. Her name is Danielle. She is at Sun Sign Self on Instagram. I met her earlier on this year in February at a retreat with Rebecca Wilson, the Womb Alchemy retreat. And our encounter was so funny because we met in the car and we were both lost. And then she kind of guided me and I followed her to arrive at the space. So I already felt like there was some kind of magic forming. And then we got talking. And funnily enough, she is from the same town that my grandmother lives in Wales, and it's a very tiny town, like not many people know about it. So the connection was already there, and I just knew that there was magic here. And Danielle is a counsellor. She is trained in human design, which is what we're going to get into topic of conversation today. And she's also an astrologer, combining astrology with human design. And human design is something I've been hearing lots about, and I'm very, very intrigued by it. Like, I've done the human design test online, like the quiz, and I'm a generator, which apparently is one of the most common ones. I don't know, but I would love to get into deep diving into all of this with Danielle today. So let's welcome Danielle to the Awaken, Heal and Transform podcast. Ooh. I did a very brief intro into how we met and how we connected through Rebecca Wilson and the magic that we obviously went on during that weekend. And it was beautiful to connect with you. And through that, here we are. And I really wanted to invite you onto the podcast today to share your journey, because we touched on it briefly during the retreat and it was so inspiring. And I just really feel that you have a lot to share with my listeners and with yours as well. So please, over to you. Let us hear a little bit about you and your journey and what's kind of brought you along to where you are today with all the magic that you offer.
Oh, thank you, Francesca. And oh my goodness, that was a really lovely intro. And I'm really delighted to be here and to talk to you and see you again, because it's been a couple of months, isn't it? When did we meet? It was in
February.
Yeah, lovely. Yes. So first of all, I'm a counsellor. Yeah. So I specialise in recovery from trauma relating to abuse. So sexual, physical or emotional. And I'm also a certified astrologer and a human design guide. And so I use a bespoke blend of these modalities to support people on their healing and spiritual journeys. So I would say that my clients are just a few steps behind me on this path to remembering. They are curious and they are ready to journey inwards and to reconnect with themselves.
Yeah.
And they're willing to be active participants in our calls and want to do the work involved to examine themselves and take steps towards personal growth.
So beautiful. So tell me how you got into combining these incredible modalities.
Sure. Okay. Oh, well, I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about my awakening moment. It was something that you asked me to have a think about for this discussion. And it wasn't really a moment. It was definitely a long process over several years, and then maybe like a final jolt that pushed me into the healing, awakening space with a little bit more urgency, and it almost felt kind of feverish at the time. But I'll explain more. As with any great therapeutic story, it starts in childhood. Gosh, so I grew up in a strictly religious family. And it was one of those religions that's more of a way of life rather than a nod to a Sunday morning. So this was a religion that permeated the family culture. And I was told or taught what to believe, how to act, what to do, what not to do, my values, who my friends were. And as with most religions, I would say in Western culture, critical thinking and questioning the rhetoric was not encouraged. And females were, of course, not at the top of the food chain. So I learned very quickly not to speak up or to make a fuss. I adopted people-pleasing behaviours. I got my validation from being the good girl. I would attend church. I'd wear appropriate clothing. I'd do really well in school. I wouldn't swear. I'd get good grades. I'd be polite. I wouldn't answer back. I was a delight. I was always smiling, gracious and kind until I wasn't. Yeah. So I would say at around the age of 17, I became very depressed. I started to withdraw. And this is the type of depression that I was wallowing and lonely and vulnerable, and I was numb to my entire existence. I shut off completely. I was incredibly insecure. I felt awkward. I was uncomfortable around everyone and everything. I never felt good enough. The rules and the way of being that was expected of me in the family and in the church always felt really unattainable. So I was always left feeling really devalued. And the people pleasing was no longer working, because to please my peers, I would displease my parents. And to please my parents, I would be displeasing my peers. And I would get told off by the elders of my congregation. I was regularly being corrected for my behaviour. And the shame that entrenched my entire being was I felt visible to the entire world. And I felt that they could see how unworthy I felt.
Yeah. Wow, Danielle, thank you so much for sharing that so vulnerably, because I feel like that story can resonate for so many women, you know, in our own ways, and how it kind of came about, but the feeling of the people pleasing and trying to do right by everybody else, and yet such self-neglect through it all without even thinking that was a choice to choose self.
Right. Yeah. And these behaviors, they happen automatically as a form of survival, whether the conditioning's coming from religion or family or society or the patriarchy or however it was that we were brought up. That's the messaging. And my intention for sharing this then isn't to blame or to show resentment, but laying out those foundations for my journey. Because I get what this meant for my parents. For my mum, this way of being was a lifesaver. She needed this. It was a form of protection for her after several of her own traumas that she experienced. For my dad, he followed suit, and I get it. And I still get it. I've got a lot of respect for my family and for their beliefs, and I understand why they remain within the faith, but for me, it didn't work.
No, you were standing your ground and saying, no, this is my life, right? So then what happened? What was the turning point when you took back or regained that power and control?
Yeah, well, it didn't feel like it at the time. I don't know, on reflection, maybe it did, but I would say around the age of 19, I slowly started to pull away from the church. And eventually I made a clean break, and this ruptured my relationship with my family. I lost the majority of my friends that I had at the time, because of course I only had friends within the religion. And they were all told not to associate with me anymore because I was a bad influence. And I was hurt and I was angry and I was rejected. And I was like a coiled spring that had been held so tightly for so many years of being so good, that when I made that final break, I bounced and I bumped off and into every surface available. I'm hurting myself along the way. I was emotionally bruised and bleeding. And up until this point, I hadn't even had sex. I'd never smoked a cigarette. I might have been drunk a few times, but I hadn't been given that space to explore and to find my own edges or my own boundaries that you might normally do as a teenager. I was really naive. And I maintained that good girl persona despite being accused and having fingers pointed at me for all of this time. So of course, I rebelled in my early 20s. My answer to anyone questioning why I was doing something was because I can. Rebel.
And I love the word, the use of the word rebel, right? Because is it rebelling, or is it just being attuned to what you want to do and going, hey, I'm just gonna live me, I'm gonna be me and explore all those things. And I love how we use this word as the rebellious type or the rebellious archetype, and truly it's just our true nature, isn't it? Just wanting to come forth and not giving a shit really about the expectations around all that's kind of built up around us. So I hear you. The rebel archetype.
Rebel archetype, yeah. And I love that reframe as well, because at the time I felt really ashamed. Yeah. And it was a couple of years later, I fell pregnant. And I felt alone and terrified and ashamed. And I wasn't working because I couldn't hold down a job. My finances were a mess. I was a mess. So even though I was doing this kind of rebelling, the rejection that I'd experienced from pulling away was too much for me. I was living at the time with a friend of mine, and I'm pretty sure she was struggling to be around me because it wasn't unusual for her to come home and find me passed out from downing bottles of vodka. But I'll get to the point, because at this time, we had a landlady, and she was a spiritual facilitator. That's what she called herself. And at that time, and I'm talking like early 2000s, that was a bit wacky. It was really unusual, especially where I'm from in Wales. But she was really kind to me, and I felt a really strong pull towards her. And at the same time, absolutely terrified of her, because she was talking about angels and spirits and energy. And of course, from my upbringing, it was ingrained within me to be afraid. Fear ran the show. Anything linked to the occult was devil's work. And that includes yoga, meditation, astrology. Like Mystic Meg was turned off on my at that time in my life. Now I see it as divine timing, because I've decided to have a termination. I understand that this might be triggering for some listeners, and I can tell you it has triggered me for years since, but I made a choice to end that pregnancy because for me the alternative wasn't an option. I couldn't look after myself, and I had no support. And this woman, my landlady, she helped me through the process. She literally turned up at the hospital wearing white and put a crown on my head and told me I was beautiful, talked me through and explained that I was having contractions. And she did this at one of the most ugliest moments of my life. I couldn't hate myself more. And I think I broke my own heart at that point. I'd gone to the edge of what I'd been taught growing up from the Bible, that I was wrong, and I'd walked past that point, to the point of no return. This was like the ultimate sin, and I did not feel beautiful. So the self-destruct button was integrated even deeper into my system. But my landlady had also offered me the foundations of spiritual connection. So she sat with me during my recovery. She taught me all about auras and colours and angels and archangels. She introduced me to the work of Louise Hay. She taught me all about how our body stores our emotions. These seeds have been sown. It was amazing. And thinking about it now, it was incredible how this was happening at the same time.
Wow. This is so powerful. What a powerful journey and story. And it's these that I find so beautiful, the real breakdown moments in our lives that it takes for one to have to, in some ways, experience or to feel, to know that there is something beyond that, something on the other side. And what a blessing this earth angel came to you at the right time, when your life was so destructive, and where could that have spiraled, right? It was really necessary that this angel came through and went, see the light that you are, remember the being that you came here to be. And it's the fallen angels that then can fly to the evolution of the archangel, of the mastery angel. And so I presume then at this point, when you were learning about the auras and Louise Hay, this kind of just opened and expanded your mind. Yeah. And so where did the counseling come in? Where did this kind of come in together, or was it separate? Tell us about that.
Okay. So again, this was early 20s, so I would have been about 24. And then about 6 months later, I decided I'd had enough of the UK. I announced to everyone that I was leaving. I sold my car, I bagged up all of my clothes and shoes, and I gave them to my friends. And I said my goodbyes, and I left with a friend of mine with the intention of never coming back.
Wow.
I had £800. And off we went. And I left for 5 years. I made it for 5 years. My friend and I, we flew to Europe. We eventually made our way to Southeast Asia and then Australia on a complete shoestring. We worked along the way. We made connections with people who travelled and knew how to live this lifestyle. Eventually, I settled in Spain for a couple of years, and I worked a load of random jobs, as you do. And eventually, I made my way back to the UK. I didn't want to, but something happened in my family, and I made my way back. After having amazing times and awful times. And again, so I got myself into some quite precarious situations due to my own recklessness and complete naivety of the world. But I also had some really astonishing and incredible experiences that I'll never forget. So I'm back in the UK. I still don't have a clue of who I am, even though I've been all over the world searching. And this is around the time of my Saturn return.
Ah, okay.
I didn't know at the time. Yeah. So I would have been about 29, 30, and I got into a really unhealthy relationship that went completely wrong. I had a massive breakdown, or as Brene Brown calls them, breakthrough.
Yeah.
This is when the healing began.
Yeah.
So I started a very serious journey to recovery. I spent a lot of time in therapy. I started to sober up. I eventually got myself a full-time job, and I got back on my feet. And then a few years later, feeling solid, I made the decision to go to university for the first time in my life. And I decided that I wanted to study counselling. And it was at this juncture that I was faced with me. So my very first assignment in uni was to stand up in front of the lecture room and deliver a presentation answering the question, who am I? I had no idea. And I buckled under this assignment. And I remember I just moved in with my partner at the time, and I was crying to him. I was wailing in the night that I felt so alone and so lost and in pain. And he had no idea what was going on, couldn't understand. And that spiritual seed that had been planted a decade previously started to sprout. And even though it had been watered through my experiences and from the people I'd met along the way, it was here that it started to flourish, because to be spiritual, I feel, is to fully embrace being human.
Yeah.
Being spiritual is to acknowledge that we're a spirit being in a human body, here to live out this human experience. And up until this point, I'd been completely detached and dissociated from my human body. I hated it for a start, completely abused it. So finding out who I am underneath the alcohol and the masks and the chameleon personas was really the start of my awakening.
Yeah.
Big time.
This is the ebbs and flows of the life. But what I particularly love and I wanted to highlight was that original, what you said there was the spiritual seed was planted through that earth angel that came through to you many years prior. And I've been getting goosebumps the entire conversation, because I love how you stated that, because it takes that one impactful moment to happen, to really settle and take time to integrate. And I think at that age point, things do take a longer period of time to integrate. But the perception was already widened. Your awakening was already, okay, what are the possibilities here? She gave you the possibilities, and knowing that you had the opportunity to choose, and you did, you rightly chose. You were like, right, packing up, I'm going, I'm figuring this out, I'm, changing the life that had happened. But the actual landing of the seed and the flourishing of the seed happened again once a breakdown occurred. There was a remembrance to go back to, and the spiral of life, this is like the epitome of a spiral of life, right? Okay, so you're studying counseling now, you've chosen you're now faced with, who am I, right? Oh, what a question.
Right. And for me, healing isn't about becoming the best versions of ourselves. Healing is about inviting the rejected and the shame-filled and the angry and the wretched parts of ourselves to the table and welcoming them all in with open arms. And it's about seeing every part of you for what it is and every experience, and saying, hey, I see you. You can come out of your hidey hole and hang out with the rest of us. And it was in this way of healing I accepted how sensitive I am, how terrified I am, how brave I am, how insecure I am. It's in this honesty then that I'm able to see myself and embrace authenticity. And it's scary to do that when we've been conditioned to self-protect. The trauma responses are in there. Many of us have been greatly conditioned through our upbringing to live in a very different way to that which goes against who we are. So it would have been in 2019 that I found astrology. And I feel like I was late to the party probably because of the deep messaging that I was carrying, that it was devil's work, right?
Yeah.
So I read a book called The Luminaries, which is the psychology of the sun and the moon. So here comes in my sort of counseling and psychology studies linked with astrology, and I'm hooked. And I found out my moon sign. And I feel everything changed, because I've never really felt like an Aries. I always knew that I was an Aries, and my limited knowledge of what that meant never resonated for me. And that's my sun sign. But oh my gosh, my moon sign is in Pisces.
Oof, yeah.
And I've got a stellium in the 12th house, which is Pisces energy. And so much about me started to click into place. I went on this journey. Then I was introduced to human design. And this is like astrology and then some. And I've been obsessed with both modalities ever since, because if, like me, you disconnected from yourself from a young age just to survive, then being handed a map, quite literally, of who you are at a soul level is like the most treasured and wonderful gift I think I've ever received. And my legs are goosebumping. For me, it was so validating, it was so reassuring, and it gave me so much permission to own the rejected parts of myself that I had been told did not fit in societies or religions or the patriarchy's version of me.
Yeah. So the who am I, through your own research in astrology and the human design, then started to come into this full sense of understanding of who you were that allowed yourself to self-accept.
Yeah. So I specialized in working in recovery from trauma.
Yeah.
I understand now why, because it was through that specialism that I uncovered my own traumas and did a lot of my own work. But when you have experienced trauma, and I would say many of us have, there is, our brains have one job. They have one job, and that's to help us to survive and keep us safe. It's not to make us happy. It's not to bring us joy. It's for us to survive. And if survival meant shutting down and being in freeze or fawn or fight or flight or whatever it is, that was for our survival. And that abandonment then, because you're no longer in the front brain, working in and responding from the back part of your brain, you've abandoned you. And so these what I call like personal development tools, the astrology and the human design, for me were a really wonderful way to reconnect with you without having to kind of dig through all of the layers. They've given you the kind of the base at the bottom. And then, so human design, I see, for especially for adults, is a deconditioning tool. That will require you to heal. And it isn't a cute and fun tool that tells you about who you are. Having this information will change your life. And once you have the information, you're going to want some help to integrate it into your life, because you're going to essentially go on a journey of deconditioning, aka healing. Because when you look at your chart, we've not looked at your chart.
Oh my gosh, we haven't. But I'm such a zodiac geek. Like whenever I meet someone new, I'll be like, what's your sun sign? I'm like, okay, your sun sign. But what's your moon? Like just what you said about when you found out your moon. I'm like, but I want to know your moon, because I know that like that's your internal world. That's how you, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the moon sign, because it is really one of the most important for me, I think.
Right, okay, so yeah, and the moon, I know that you are a Cancer sun, so the moon is the ruler, you know, of your sun, and really important to you. But our moon sign reflects our internal world. It's all about our feelings, our desires, our emotions. I see the moon sign, so if the sun sign is kind of our personality, well, your rising sign is when people first meet you, and what they see first of all, when they get to know you a little bit more, they see your sun sign. But if you were to go on holiday with that person, or if you were to live with that person, and really get a bit more intimate with them, you meet their moon sign.
That's what I love.
Finding out your moon sign can be really revealing, because in a world where we're not showing our, you know, expressing our feelings and our emotions, and we're told to kind of quiet them down, it gives you real permission to be like, oh, actually, this is my internal world.
And then you can accept that, because for me, so I'm a sun Cancer, and then my moon is Capricorn, and they're so polar, right? So now, before I understood that, I was always in this constant conflict battle of wanting freedom but then needing stability, and it was like I was always in the, but which one am I? Which one am I? Am I this today, or am I this tomorrow? But to really understand that part of the chart, and those, it did bring the self-acceptance, you know, it really did. It went, okay, it's all of me. I love freedom, but with stability. And it was to be able to create the cohesion between the polars.
Yeah, how can you hold space for all of it? You were born under a full moon. And with that, you're coming into this lifetime with the energy of the full moon, which again, you know, will flavor your birth chart.
Oh, I mean this, I'm so passionate, like I'm starting to get really excited, you can tell. But how does knowing your human design then really affect how you live your life?
Sure. Well, when you look at your human design chart, now human design is a synthesis of ancient wisdom. So you've got astrology in there, you've got the Hindu Brahmin chakra system, the tree of life from the Kabbalah, and you've got the Chinese I Ching. And this is blended with modern science of quantum physics. It's a really fascinating chart. But what you see when you are given your chart is your potential. This is who you can be when you align with the truth of who you are, and how your soul came into this vehicle then of your body. And it's like you're not entitled to living in alignment just because you exist. It requires you to align. And especially if, I mean, it requires work most of the time, unless you were raised in an idyllic scenario. Whole point of human design is to guide us in the direction of who we are meant to be versus who we are conditioned to be.
Love that.
And you'll never be the same again. Well, I wasn't. And you'll walk away knowing how worthy and how on purpose you really are. And I really feel that we need people to share this journey with and to guide us and support us, because if you could figure this out alone, you probably would have done that already.
Right. I mean, you know, the whole point of relationships that we have in our lives is to mirror back that which we are maybe not seeing, and that's why the importance of our own healing and transformation does come through the work with another, through relationships. So I'm so with you on that, and the importance of that. The only ever time I've stepped my sort of toes into human design is I've done the online quiz, but I've been hearing so much about it, and I really do see the importance of it. And after you explaining today, it's just like, it makes everything just drop, doesn't it? And go, okay, the potentiality of who I am is all mapped for me. But how can I integrate this into my life? And then you really live purposefully with what you can feel inside. You know, when we all say, oh, I know I'm meant for more, and it's because we all are, right? But then when you've got the blueprint of that map through the human design chart and through your astrology chart, everything makes sense.
Yeah. And the more you are, the more you are, the more permission you give other people to be themselves, because
Right.
we are all one piece of the giant jigsaw of humanity.
Right.
And it's about being how shapely can we be in our puzzle shape? Like, how much of our shape can we actually be? And I feel like human design gives us that permission and says, well, this is your shape. Perhaps you can be conditioned to look like this. So what can we work with here? And when clients are coming in and I'm offering information to them, now this is an experiment. Human design is an experiment. It's an opportunity for you to take it away and experiment with it. Does it resonate? Does it work for you? Does your life change? This information speaks to your genetic coding and it starts waking up. As it wakes up, and as I've been experimenting with mine, well, as you will understand, I guess, from my story and from us meeting, my life has changed dramatically since having this information and then working with it. Yeah, so becoming this active participant in the information. And when these nudges are coming through, and I'm learning to listen to my body rather than being in my mind, because we're not thinking our way through this life anymore. We're dropping into our bodies, and you know, your work is all about that embodiment. I'm now listening to my own intuition and going, okay, I always knew this. I'm offering information to clients. They're going, I'm like, I know. Yeah.
Because you're speaking directly to the soul.
And the soul responds.
Yeah.
It's really incredible work. And when I'm able to weave this in, so if you were coming in to have a human design session with me, that's not counselling, but the counselling background is being able to hold that safe space for you to explore and work with. I can then weave this into my therapy sessions with clients, but it's something that would be offered after the recovery from trauma.
Yeah.
It has to happen once our nervous systems are in regulation again.
And give us an example of the integration of some of this work then, maybe from your own experience.
Sure. My own experience of understanding my energy type. So I'm a generator of the 5 energy types. I'm a generator. Are you the same?
I'm the same, yeah.
Generator is here. Their one job is to light up the world by doing work that lights you up yourself. So by engaging in work, and we are here to kind of be the working dogs, right? We're here to do the work. We can work and work and work and work. We have defined sacrals in our chart that doesn't switch off. It keeps going when we're doing the things that we're here to do. So when we're doing things that really bring us like joy and pleasure, like I feel like we're doing, it lights us up so much that everyone else feels that energy. It's that generator energy that keeps the world turning.
Yeah.
So as I've then been using the information and integrating the information, so when you have when you're a generator or a manifesting generator and you have this defined sacral, you learn to respond to your sacral response, which is a body response. So your sacral response is something we would have been conditioned out of as children, because your sacral will give a yes or a no. Through a yes would be a uh-huh, and a no would be a mm-mm. And it's the sacral sound that comes through the body up through the mouth. Now, if, for example, you're a child and the parent offers you a drink, do you want a drink? And you go, mm-hmm, and they say, use your words. We're being conditioned out of using that sound, and our words come from up here, whereas our sounds come from our gut, that gut energy.
Yeah.
So relearning to listen to my gut. The body literally moves when we want to do something. So if something's a hell yes, the shoulders are back, the gut's kind of out on show, the chest is forward, and we're puffed, and we're like, yeah. And when it's a no, it's a real like, no.
So true, yeah.
But we don't always listen to that. I know in my past, I absolutely haven't listened to that, and it's caused chaos. The integration is learning to listen to your, so I have sacral authority. So there are different types of authority. Just because you're a generator doesn't mean you have sacral authority. So we can look at your chart, learning how to work with your authority, and then learning to work with your strategy for how to best use that energy. Go away and experiment with that and see what happens. And then there's way more information underneath.
Wow. I mean, you've got me wanting to know all the ins and outs now. Like, if anybody's listening to this and doesn't want to know their chart right now, like, where have you been during this conversation? That's all I can say, because it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Danielle, so what have you got coming up? How can people find you? Your magic.
You can find me on Instagram. So what I've been doing, I've been slowly moving, listening to my sacral and moving away from employed work to setting up by myself. So I now have 3 days a week, sometimes 4, dedicated to working with my own clients. You can find me on Instagram. That's where I've set myself up. My Instagram handle is @sun_sign_self. So sun sign self is the part of my business I use for the personal development tools that I love. So you can find me there. I have a link tree there. I've got lots of offerings. Please DM me. I love connecting with people. Ask me any questions. I'll get back to you and help you as much as I can.
Yeah, I'm going to put all of those details in the show notes of the podcast, but this has been an absolutely incredible, enlightening conversation, like just to see your journey to where you are now in your full human design embodiment of self. It's like, yeah, the permission for others to explore that for themselves as well. So I'm so grateful for you, for the work that you're offering the world and how important it is. So yeah, thank you so much for your time today, Danielle. It's been incredible, really, really.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful too. And it's been a real pleasure to connect with you again. It's been a real joy.
Thank you. I'm going to